Good afternoon. In about 1982, Steve Jobs sat down with John Scully and tried to convince him to join Apple. He said to him, "Are you going to join me and change the world, or are you going to sell sugar water for the rest of your life?" And what he was trying to tell John Scully is, you can't change the world with sugar water. But I think Steve Jobs was probably wrong. In the last 30 years, sugar water has changed the world, not for the better. And we're here today to try and convince you or tell you a story about how sugar actually can be the solution to the global sugar crisis. Because if treated rightly, with the right approach, it can actually reverse all the problems that have happened over the last 30 years. And so don't worry about Steve Jobs and his family. We're going to come to the point where you should join us and change the world with sugar. And the crisis is absolutely huge. And it's probably the elephant in the room at this food ingredients conference. There are a lot of people here talking about different things and sugar reduction. But it is a tremendous threat to the world economy. The McKinsey Group put the cost of diabetes and obesity and overweight at about $2 trillion, which puts it up there with tobacco and war. Diabetes alone is costing the world $850 billion a year. The United Nations have been putting pressure on all major food companies to support the UN Sustainability Goal 3, to have healthier choices in their supply chain. Major social influencers are targeting sugar and sugar-related products to say, let's get at this product out of our people's diets. Taxes around the world are being implemented to try and not just reduce consumption, but to help fund the increasing medical costs that are absorbent with this sugar crisis. And brands famously are looking for solutions. And Coca-Cola just posted $1 million for people who can put together ideas that help them solve this particular problem. And the good news is, and I'm sure you'll see this everywhere in the conference, is that consumers want healthier choices. Everywhere you go, and this is a Nielsen study, 60,000 people around the world, and wherever you go, people are consistently saying, I want a more natural choice, I want something which is more home prepared, I want to go back a few steps to things which are less processed and less refined. And effectively, that's what we've done. That's what our challenge has been, to find a solution to the sugar crisis. So I'm going to ask Dr. David Kannar to come up and present to you a little bit about why this solution works, and some of the pharmacology, some of the science behind it, and then I'll come back to tell you a bit about the benefits. David?
Thank you. Thanks for staying this afternoon and coming back so late. I appreciate your attendance. So my job is to take you through some of the background science, because if you're like me, years ago I tried to just reduce sugar or even get rid of sugar out of my diet, but it was very, very difficult. Everything I ate had sugar in it, and I was quite confused and frustrated at just how difficult it was to actually reduce it, or at least even address the challenge, because I still like to go home and eat chocolate. I still like to have an indulgent snack every now and again, and so it's difficult to have them without sugar in them. So, but I wanted to hit the crux of the issue for you, or address the crux of the issue. Behind most disease processes, whether it be cardiovascular, there's some sort of inflammatory component, whether it's cancer or a joint disease or anything like that. There's an inflammatory component to the disease. If you Google, I've just posted this for you, so that if you Google the top inflammatory foods, you'll see the sugar is right at the top. If you Google the anti-inflammatory foods, then you get all of these fruits and vegetables. And then so I thought, well, what we do is just dig into garlic, for example. Garlic is one of the top anti-inflammatory foods, and yet it is 20 to 30% carbohydrate. You can see there's sugar. So it's not sugar. Sugar is not the problem at all. It's actually what we're doing to refine the sugar. So we don't refine garlic and get the sugar out of the garlic and then get rid of all of the other nutrients. All of these are the products here, which is exactly what we're doing with white refined sugar at the moment. So white refined sugar is essentially just the carbohydrates, and everything else is thrown away. So if you look at what we're doing historically, anyone who's had anything to do with the sugar industry knows that the old way of eating is just chewing on a sugar cane, or some of the older products, which I'll show you in a second. But in essence, what's happened is there's that white refined sugar is removed in a garlic context, all the sulfur compounds. So in they're good polyphenols, Sophia. So flavonoids, polyphenols are left in the sugar, and so we now leave those in the sugar. They're in indigenous sugars, the old-fashioned sugars, they're all there, but they've been very difficult to measure and monitor. And so the technology we've used, which I'll show you in a second, is actually allowing us to keep those compounds in consistently so that there's no variability. So in essence, it's not sugar, it's just the refining that's the problem. So to address that, then it's not actually sugar itself, it's not the sugar cane. We'll show you a lovely video on this that Matt's prepared in a second. But it's not the sugar cane, it's not born evil, it's just what we've done to it. And in essence, I think consumers are waking up, as Matt said in that Nielsen study, consumers are waking up to the fact and desiring foods now that are less processed. And so that's partly behind what we've done. So here's some of the older, if you've been familiar with these old indigenous sugar, there's jaggery, that's an Indian product. From South America, there's all sorts of other Rapadura products. There's from Africa, South Africa's Mauritius, there's Demerara, there's all sorts of old-fashioned products, and coconut sugar, for example, and that's how they're made. They leave everything in it, they boil them down into a little tub. Very expensive, but because they're handmade, they're not industrial. But there's lots of evidence. This is one particular paper that was in 2012, talked about the benefits including of these old products decreasing the risk of diabetes and obesity. So why aren't these products used? Well, the problem with these products is that they're very, very sticky. They're very, very uneconomic if you're a food company. They're very, very inconsistent, so there's no technology. They just boil the juice and pour them into a container. They taste great. They're a great product to use, but they're not a one-for-one swap in branded recipes. And also, they're too expensive. So if I owned a Mars bar and I wanted to put this into Mars bar, the Mars bar would, instead of being $1, it would be $15, $20, $30 a Mars bar. So it's not affordable. So it's not a one-for-one swap, and it's certainly not an economical swap. And so the white refined sugar is difficult. There's been some good studies about this, but refined sugar, from my experience, is the same as most. It's very difficult to get out. In beverages, it's somewhat simple because you can just put in an intense sweetener and you can get away with this. But in a food where it's used as a filler, it's used for taste or as a binder in muesli bars or cereals or anything like that, or it's used as a preservative or even as a fermentation substrate, there's difficulty there because you can't get rid of sugar in that instance. And so if you're a food company with that type of issue, then you're stuck. There's absolutely no option. There's no industrial option other than white refined sugar.
Welcome to Nucane, the good sugar.
Hi.
You know that natural cane sugar starts out as basically good, right? It's what we all then do to it that causes problems and makes it bad. In creating this, all the naturally good stuff is removed and we are just left with all the problems.
Hey!
But we have found a clever way to keep just the right amounts of the good stuff in. All natural, rich in antioxidants, and it's low GI, so it helps release energy into your body more slowly. Lowering the GI of your diet will also help manage overweight and obesity, which are both linked to diabetes and heart disease. We call it Nucane, the good sugar, and it's here to help make the world a healthier place for everyone. It's all natural, non-GMO, and the way it's made in sugar mills, it's actually less wasteful on resources. And because it's 100% cane sugar, it still tastes exactly like, well, sugar. Soon, Nucane will be something you can buy in store. But more importantly, it's been created specifically to be a one-for-one replacement in most of the foods and beverages we buy every day. That's because our clever technology ensures that Nucane can be made to the most precise standards, every time, even in the largest quantities. We can also make it in sugar mills around the world, so it can be shipped to anywhere a brand is made. So it's perfect for brands that want to give healthier choices to people. Now, we don't want anyone to overconsume any type of sugar, but if you are a retailer or manufacturer and have no real alternative but to use something sweet in your products, well, use Nucane, the good sugar. Join us.
So I see a lot of people shaking their heads going, this is impossible. I had the same conclusion when we first did the first clinical research, and in fact that's why we've taken some time to actually to research this. So I'll now dig into the science, which is my job, and Matt will then go through how we're commercialising this at the moment. But in essence, I'll just summarise this for you. But in essence, it's still 100% natural cane sugar, so no chemicals added, there's no processing aids, there's nothing like that. We just leave in and monitor the refining or the processing so that it's less refined. So it's out of a primary mill, so we've actually cut out the refining step completely. It's a one-for-one swap in most recipes where we've tested. And the thing that we've done is just retrofit some near-infrared scanning technology into primary mills. At the moment, I don't know if you're familiar, but if you are and you've been through a sugar factory, they're all manually operated. So it's basically, if Amir was on one day and I was on the next, he might have a much better eye than me, and so his sugar is better quality than mine. And so that's a colonial industry. It's been brought up that way. It's over 100 and something years old, and it's all manual. And so we've just installed some computer or near-infrared scanning equipment that scans, Matt, is it 600 times every 8 seconds? I got it right. Oh, wow. I'm not an engineer. But it scans, and it's a closed-loop system that actually monitors and then actually produces consistent sugar, if you like. The reason that the food industry went to white refined sugar many years ago was just because of consistency. These old refined or less refined products are just inconsistent, and so we've just made them more consistent. It can also be produced in any sugar mill as well, so it's retrofitted to existing sugar cane mills, if you like. Now we get to the favourite part, so I can show you. What I've done is quoted other people's research. I thought it was unfair to quote my own at this point, but these are groups that I'm familiar with. So this is essentially how sucrose. So sucrose is a double bond, a disaccharide. It's actually broken down by these digestive enzymes in our gut and then liberates both glucose and fructose into the bloodstream. So in instance, it's the same thing, Sophia, with the green tea polyphenols, if you like. So they do the same thing. Very similar research has been published on this. So these particular compounds, the flavonoids and phenols, are well published and actually block that enzyme. So what it does is just taste it. It's all sensory, it's still the same, but there's less of it actually digested, so it changes the metabolism. So by removing these things out of the natural sugar, if you like, then what happens is you're liberating all of the glucose and fructose. Whereas if you leave the phenols and flavonoids in, and only a very, very small amount. There's two proteins. Actually, I'll just skip to the next one for you. There's two proteins. So this is all of the intestines and the bloodstream. And then, so what happens is the sugar actually, so if it is digested, it actually hits the SGLT1 and then gets shot across to GLUT2 and then into the bloodstream. It's a protein mediation and carry. And so what happens is there's SGLT1 and GLUT2 are actually inhibited by the proteins as well. So to answer that question, what happens is that the sucrose just stays here. It doesn't get metabolized and just goes straight through into the gastrointestinal tract and excreted. So it doesn't change. No, we've checked, well, you have to trust me on the human side of it. But in animal experiments, it just gets excreted and there's more. We've published this so you can see it. It actually gets excreted out the back end, and so that the animals then just have more sucrose in their feces. And so it doesn't change bowel flora. In fact, actually it improves bowel flora because the microbiome need carbohydrates, and it gets right down into the terminal bowel. Again, that's been published. That's not my research. So it's actually the natural mechanisms, of course, and it works quite well. The GI of the product then is then quite a lot lower, about 30+% lower. You can see what happens in high glycemic index foods. That's blood glucose over time. The problem with high GI foods is that the blood glucose then rises very, very rapidly, and then there's an ensuing insulin sensitivity actually becomes a problem in this instance, because then insulin then is released, and then as insulin's up over here, it shadows there, then what happens is that you start to feel hungry again, your body's looking for more carbohydrates. And so what happens with low GI carbohydrates is that they actually then lower and flatter, and so the energy is actually a sustained release. It's equivalent to putting in fat in foods, so fat in confectionery, for example, or fat in milk, and protein does exactly the same thing. What it does is actually then increases the digestibility, or increases the complexity of digestion, and so it then lowers and flattens everything. Why? Because there's so much more stuff going on. As soon as you just put pure white sucrose in, and then you get rid of the phytochemicals, then in essence this is what happens. It just increases the glycemic index. Low GI actually then flattens that curve out, so there's less products, less glucose actually being absorbed. So this is just a recent publication, and that's highlighted there, is that low glycemic index diets are probably one of, if not judged here as the better strategies for for weight management. That's published, and that's referenced there. So anyone wants to look at that, you can find that. Again, with the glycemic index and low GI foods and that strategy, that's well published. That is, there's some big studies that have been published on this. There's some Cochrane reviews on this as well. You can see long studies over a long period of time reduce the risk of diabetes, and high GI diets actually increase the risk of diabetes and obesity. So essentially, what we've done is shift to white refined sugar, and then it's the same with starches. It's the same with any refined carbohydrate. By the refined carbohydrates, what we've done is move the glycemic index up in our diet and then increase the risk of diabetes and obesity. So now the challenge for our next generation will be then to reduce the glycemic index of the diet. But that's happening by slowly everyone going back to less refined foods. So that consumer direction and then manufacturers being able to deliver on that product, on a low GI product, will actually address that trend. If you like, though, in the sugar industry, it's very, very difficult because of now you're jumping in now. The challenge is that there's no such thing as anything other than a white refined sugar for them. And so what we've done is just made available a less refined raw sugar, if you like. I'm going to hand back over to Matt.
So if you pop down to your current sugar processing place, you'll find there's 3 big stages: crushing, milling, and then refining. And that's when the organizations, brands, and industrial customers buy directly from the sugar mills. What we've done is cut out that entire process. So we've cut out roughly about a third of the production process of making sugar in industrial quantities. There are solutions around the place, but a lot of them are very, very expensive. They put on complexity to production, whereas we've gone the other way. We've taken out a lot of complexity. So we go directly from the primary mill to produce the sugar, and then therefore industrial customers can buy directly from a primary mill. And so in many places we now shift the value of the product from the refinery down to where the crop is grown. So in places where we're already in operation in Australia, which is a co-op, we're actually returning more value to the growers. And so industrial customers actually can get a less refined, less processed, healthier, rich in antioxidant product, which in theory is chopped out 1/3 of the production process, which is why we say it's less processed and more efficient. Now, we don't sell sugar. We sell the IP and the technology to the sugar mill, and they sell it to people like you. So we don't set the price, we don't set the distribution, we don't set the trade or any of those issues. We just sell the IP to the sugar mills, and then you organize directly with your own supply chain. If you looked at a bit of a competitor map and said, well, what is out there that I could potentially use? Well, there's lots of different things, but all of them have limitations. They're either not low GI, they're not antioxidants, or if they are, such as maybe coconut sugar, which is recognized as being a healthier choice, it is not a one-for-one swap. It won't be able to replace your products, and it certainly isn't economical, and it certainly isn't going to be able to be a one-for-one swap in your branded recipes because the price is just far too high. And so with across the board, we've been trying to find a solution to this global epidemic that is industrial, low GI, antioxidants, a one-for-one swap, efficient for existing mills and current supply chains so it can move globally around the world very quickly, and economical, not just for the brands that are buying the product, but if I was to charge you 5 times more for this product, you couldn't pass it on to your customers or your consumers. And so it needs to be efficient for everybody throughout the process. We're now in test with branding companies in Europe, in Asia, in Thailand, and so those markets we're getting to next. You'll be happy to know that we actually don't install the technology. We've got signed global agreements with Foch and Schneider, 2 of the biggest players in this particular space, and so we can scale quite rapidly because they can go to any sugar mill in the world and install the technology and actually maintain the technology again. So we just manage the IP. They put together all the infrastructure and put it together. So as a summary, to make this solution global, to make it successful for everybody, it's got to work for the entire supply chain. So to change and to address this major crisis, it's no good if some of the parties can't get involved. So it's good for sugar mills. It can go into any food grade sugar mill around the world. They can sell direct to customers and transfer more value back to the growers. It's a healthier choice, and we've chopped out the refinery costs. The actual technology makes the sugar mill more efficient. So it reduces water waste, it reduces electricity waste, and actually makes the mill slightly greener. And they're selling a value-added commodity. It's good for brands. They can do a one-for-one swap. So even if they're doing sugar reduction, if they're taking sugar out, they can take sugar out and then put a healthy sugar back in. So if you're chopping out 30 to 40% of your sugar, then why leave white refined sugar still left? Put in a healthier choice, and that will give you two benefits: a less sugar but a healthier sugar choice at the same time. You can use your existing recipe and supply chain. So many customers don't want to change the recipe. They're worried about what consumers will say. So we allow people to continue on in the same area. And of course, they've got existing supply chain and procurement models. We can follow their supply chain. If you've got customers or industrial customers which work directly with some suppliers, we just go along with them, we install the technology and move on. You can innovate. A lot of the flavonoids and the benefits in these products are very strong and very powerful. So we're working with some customers who actually say, no, we want to have some functional foods. We want to take those flavonoids and actually build new products that actually have some really healthy and strong benefits in there. So we can do that as well. And of course, our company has about 6 or 7 products in development. This is the first one. And all of them just take better strength of these powerful polyphenols that are resisting in the products. And of course, most industrial customers have a responsibility to improve the healthiness of their supply chain as well, and this fits with that. Governments looking for solutions, and they want to have sugar reduction, but they don't know how, and so this helps them in this regard. It can help move towards tax policies which have white refined sugar and a healthier sugar, so you can actually manage things and encourage consumer behavior in the right way. And of course, for places like Thailand and Brazil and Australia, which actually have large economies based on the sugar industry itself, we return more value to those economies as well. So a place like maybe Cuba or Mauritius, which export raw sugar, they can actually move to a model where they're actually selling a value-added product and not exporting raw sugar anymore. And of course, for people, they get a less processed, less refined, antioxidant-rich, low GI product, which helps them manage their weight and diabetes, but all at the same choices and without costing them all. So they could potentially still go, well, actually, I enjoy these particular foods. And of course, part of our model is Intel Inside. And so people who wish to take our product and say made with a better sugar, they can take the logo and say this is made with Nucane, the good sugar. And so consumers in store can then wander around and have a go, say, which product is this made? Is it made with a good sugar or a bad sugar? And we know in a lot of research, in most markets, 60% of consumers look for what sugar is in the product, and 40% is they look for the type of sugar. We think we're disruptive, scalable, rapid, efficient, and we advocate a healthier choice for the world. And if you're going to change the global sugar conversation, the best thing is, can you change it quickly, effectively, and efficiently all around the world? And this technology can do that. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to have you for the last session. And if you want to drop us a note or find out more, there's our contact details. You can always track us down. If not, Google us. Thank you very much.